I recognize Mr. McCaul from Texas, Chairman McCaul from Texas, for his 5 minutes question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I served as chairman of this committee for 3 terms now, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Mr. Edlow, good to see you. We worked together on these issues, and Secretary Wolf, Mr. Scott, great state of Texas. And I was a federal prosecutor charged with prosecutions at the border. Political asylum is always the magnet, and it has been abused by the cartels for many years. 85% of these claims are not legit, only 15% are. It's very simple. When they're allowed to enter the United States, because we don't have detention space, they are released into our society. They're given a notice to appear, and they disappear. And I've seen this for 20 years in Congress. In fact, my first bill was to end catch and release, and here we are today with the same program. The Trump administration, through Secretary Wolf, Mr. Edlow, implemented what I thought was a very effective plan called the Migrant Protection Protocols, remain in Mexico. Because they had to remain in Mexico pending their adjudication. If it was legitimate, they were allowed in. If not, they were not allowed into the country. And it brought the numbers down dramatically. So what happened with the Biden administration gets into power? Nearly on day one, Secretary Mayorkas rescinds the order, rescinds migrant protection protocols, remain in Mexico. And what has happened since then? Nearly 100,000 young people died in this country due to fentanyls. Enough has been seized to kill billions of people, 5 million encounters, nearly 100 on the terror watch list, which used to frighten me as chairman of this committee when I would hear of anybody on the terrorist watch list getting into the United States of America. There was a court order to force the administration to re-implement MPP. That court order, in my view, has not been fully complied with by this administration. To make things worse, they took the vetting process away from sponsors of these aliens. What has that turned into? Children going to houses, 20, 30 of them, under one sponsor, not vetted, turns into a human trafficking enterprise, a criminal enterprise. Young girls being sex trafficked and young men going to MS-13 as they try to pay back the cartels. Cartels now are in operation control. When I was down at the border after the rescission of MPP, I asked the Chief of Border Patrol, Mr. Ortiz, is there a direct cause and effect between the rescission of this program and what we're seeing at the border, totally out of chaos? He told me the answer was yes. And every Border Patrol officer will tell you that because they live it. In my state, Mr. Scott, as you know, has spent $4.5 billion just this session to deal with this problem, a federal responsibility. So my question is, do you believe, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Scott, Mr. Edlow, that Secretary Mayorkas is responsible for the consequences that followed of the rescission of MPP? And do you believe he is complicit with the consequences of what has happened to this country?
So the answer to that is a resounding yes. Obviously, the Secretary ended MPP, Migrant Protection Protocols, so he's responsible for the actions that follow that. And I would just say, look, at the end of the day, it's okay to claim asylum. What's not okay is to simply be released into the country. Or it's not okay to say that there's an immense amount of fraud in the asylum system. DHS knows that. They have the numbers. We all use the numbers that come from DHS, but they simply put blinders on and say, we're okay with that amount of fraud. It's okay for the American people. That's why we implemented MPP, and we did a number of other things. They're not doing any of that now. So all of the folks that are claiming asylum at ports of entry, again, are being released into American communities. That's not okay.
I agree. Mr. Scott, Mr. Edlow.
I agree fully, and I want to point out MPP made sure people got due process, but they did not get what they want. Most of these people, from my experience, don't really care about asylum. They don't really care about the legal documentation or process. They want to be released into the United States. Once that was taken away, the flow immediately decreased because they couldn't commit fraud. Everybody knew that. This administration got rid of that program intentionally. They're responsible for the results.
Mr. Redlow.
I also agree, and there's plenty I could say about MPP in terms of where it comes from, in terms of the INA, but I will just say this. When the court initially told the secretary to reinstitute MPP, there was an attempt to do that, a half-hearted attempt to do that, but in the press release that did that, it also made it clear that the secretary had every intention to fight that decision from the court and to take measures to end MPP in other ways. So it was really never an actual attempt to reinstate it.
The gentleman's time has expired. I recognize Mr. Correa of California.